let's suppose there's very little time left on the clock and that your team has a 3-point lead and the opposing team has the ball. And if the opposing team shoots for 3 points and makes the shot, the game is going to go into overtime. If your team fouls, the opposing team will be granted some free throws. And the number of free throws that they're going to be granted depends on the type of foul. So if you foul as your opponent is shooting and the shot is made, your opponent will be granted 1 free throw. So there's a chance they're going to win in regular time. If you foul as the opponent is shooting and the shot is missed, your opponent will be granted 3 free throws. And there's a chance that it's going to go into overtime. If you foul before your opponent shoots, your opponent will be granted 2 free throws. And each free throw made is worth 1 point. And if the teams draw, the game will go into overtime and both teams will still have a chance of winning. Coach Fenlon gives some estimates of the probabilities based on national statistics. So these probabilities might vary depending on the level at which the team is playing, or maybe the strength of the defense or offense of the teams involved. So if you're using this analysis, you might want to substitute your own probabilities instead of Coach Fenlon's. He estimates that the probability that the other team will make a free throw in this situation is 0.67. That's going to happen 67% of the time. And we're also assuming that if they make 3 free throws in a row, that the shots are independent. So the probability of making those 3 free throws in a row is 0.67 cubed. He estimates that with practice you can reduce the probability of fouling the opponent while they're shooting to 0.02. And this is a good thing to do. You don't want to foul your opponent when they're shooting because then they might actually make the shot plus get an extra free throw, which would increase their probability of winning. Nevertheless, your opponent can sense when you're going to foul and shoot when that's happening. He also points out that if you foul before the opponent takes the 3-point shot, they'll be granted 2 free throws. And 2 free throws is not going to be enough to win the game for them. So they're going to try to miss the second free throw and go for the rebound. And in this case, they might actually accidentally make the second free throw, and he estimates that that's going to happen 2% of the time. If you don't foul, he estimates that the opposing team will not get a chance to make a 3-point shot about 5% of the time. So they're going to get a chance to make that 3-point shot 95% of the time. And if they attempt the shot, they're going to be successful in that situation about 20% of the time. He also gives some other detailed estimates, which we have represented on a less detailed tree diagram on the next slide. So this tree diagram appears in your notes, and if you can't see it very well on the screen, you can download it and have a look at the page as I explained. So we can see that 3 things can happen in regular time. Either your team can lose, or it can be a draw and the game can go into overtime, or your team might actually win in regular time. And if the game goes into overtime, then there's a chance that you might win or you might lose. So your team losing is shown in blue here, and your team winning is written as a win in yellow, and overtime is in purple. And so here we've put all of the probabilities when your opponent takes a number of shots in a row. we calculate the probability by raising the probability of an individual shot to the appropriate power. Okay, so we'd like to compare both strategies. So your team might have the strategy to foul, or the other strategy is not foul, and see what happens. And in both cases, we'd like to compare the probability that your team will win to the probability that your team will lose. And here we're going to look at what can happen in regulation time. So you can either win, lose, or go into overtime. And if you choose the strategy not to foul, you also three things can happen in regulation time. Either you win, lose, or go into overtime. So to do this, we have to identify the paths on the tree diagram, considering corresponding to each event: foul and win, foul and lose, do not foul and win, do not foul and lose, do not foul, overtime, etc., etc. And then once we've identified the paths for a particular event, we have to multiply the probabilities along those paths and then add the probabilities for all paths corresponding to the event. So the same rules as we talked about before, except our tree diagram's a little more complicated.